Welcome back to our Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised 12th edition. My name is DakotaJKeeler, and today we're going to be talking about our basic provisions and the minimum composition of a deliberative assembly. So the basic principles of parliamentary procedure is a highly interwoven discipline, meaning we're going to cross-reference a lot. So in section 1, we might cross-reference to 2, 3, 40, 50, and so on. Don't worry, I'll make it easy. You might notice there's this 3-1 right here. This 3 means section 1, part 1. Well, section 3, part 1. And then down here, we have this RONR, 12th edition 40. This means Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, 12th edition, section 40. It should be kept in mind that any complex subject matter, not all exceptions can be listed for any given rule. So we have the general rule over here. This guides us in most actions, but we have the exception over here. And if we list all exceptions to the general rule, not only would Robert's rules like quadruple in size, it would become so unmanageable and so unreadable. So we need to keep that in mind. If you have a rule that seems to contradict the general principle, where that rule says it takes priority, it takes priority. Next, we're going to talk about the minimum composition of a deliberative assembly. This gives us the idea of a quorum. Your quorum is the minimum number of members that must be present to transact business. The idea is it protects you from unrepresentative action in a group by an extremely small number of members. So you can't have 2 or 3 members come together and act for the group and in the group's name. That opens the door for a lot of abuse, and so we want to avoid that. In Congress, your quorum is a majority, and we get this from Article 1, Section 5. However, this is way too large for most ordinary societies. A society instead should have a clause in their bylaw dictating the minimum number of a quorum. Now, it needs to be the greatest number of people who can reliably attend. And you don't want to plan this around your extremes, like harsh weather or unfavorable conditions. So, don't plan it around the blizzard or the flood or the tornado, because you probably shouldn't be at these meetings if those events are happening anyway. And then, in absence of said provision, the quorum is a majority of its members, if you can accurately determine the amount of members in your society. Now, in a convention, unless the bylaws specify, the quorum is a majority of registered delegates, irrespective of whether some have departed. Meaning if we have 100 registered delegates, your quorum's 51, 20 of them might depart throughout the convention. However, your quorum is still 51 delegates. In a mass meeting or a regular or properly called meeting, whose bylaws don't state a quorum, and whose members is loosely defined, so we don't know how many members there are in the society. There is no minimum quorum requirement, because we just don't know the numbers. This would be like your church congregation. So we have a convention at Outreach. It happens once a year. We pick our elders who's going to sit on our board and lead the church throughout the year. And there is no way to really know the membership. Not all churchgoers attend. All those who attend could be from 16 and older by our bylaws, and so we don't really have a way. And then your mass meeting. So this is like if I sponsor a meeting for a public park. Anyone who shows up is the meeting, or when you're forming a new society. Now you can learn more about your quorum in section 40. And then, what are the minimum officers you need to run a society? Well, there are 2. You need your chair or presiding officer, and they ensure order is kept and the rules are followed. And you need a secretary who makes a written record of the meeting, aka your minutes. If the officers are members of the society, they are counted in for the quorum requirement, and they usually are. They also get a vote, too, if they're members. Now, it's not required that a chair doesn't vote, but it's good practice that a chair only votes to break a tie, and that he should declare that he's voting to break the tie. Otherwise, if it's not a tie and his vote doesn't really matter at that point, and so he should keep it to himself to ensure impartiality and the smooth running of the organization. Now, the presiding officer should be where he can be seen by the entire assembly and they can see him. So sitting in the back corner, not really a good way to run a meeting. He's usually in the center of a table, on a podium or a stage, and the official place where the presiding officer resides is called the chair, which is usually that podium, stage, or center table. And whoever is the presiding officer is said to be in the chair. And the chair refers to the presiding officer and his or her station. Now, your secretary's desk should be located where it's easy for him or her to pass papers to the chair during the meeting. So it might be minutes from last meeting to be read aloud, it might be an order of business, it might be a motion that was hand-typed and given to the secretary, and now you're giving it to the chair to read. All of these things, it is good for them to be like lovers, right next to each other, where they can interact easily. And the duties of these officers and other officers can be found more in depth in section 47. Thank you for watching, and I hope you guys have a good day.